This week's surgery is the new sex as we discuss the 2022 sci-fi horror Crimes of the Future. Hello and welcome to the Bloody Bits Horror Show. I am your host, Eddie. The Axe Jefferson not joining me as always because he's too busy working overtime. The guy who just got used to the old sex, Tim Yobo, will not be here today. However, we will be joined once again by Ear Guy's torture device. It's Candice.
You're welcome. You don't need Yobo, you got Candice.
Hey, wait, now, guys, don't turn the episode off just yet. It's not just the two of us here because lending a bit of credibility to our discussion this week, we are joined once more by longtime friend of the show, Faustus. How are you doing today?
Oh, just fine now that I get my microphone and all the other stuff working. We have more Cronenberg, which I obviously just love, and that makes me happy.
Absolutely. And, it's December, so it's the perfect month for more Cronenberg.
Yes.
Although this one...
Very cold director.
Dark, cold, and of a singular color palette for most of the movie. But this one, though, I think there's a little bit of warmth in this movie. We'll get to that here in just a moment, though, as we're discussing Crimes of the Future. Carrying on with week 2 of Eddie-cember. That's right, a month of my choices of the best movies of 2022. But before we begin that, let's get to everybody's favorite segment. Candice, what have you been consuming this week?
Why does it have to be Candice's favorite segment?
I said everybody's favorite segment.
Yeah, I know what you're implying. But I'll tell you what I've been consuming this week, and that is Ratchet and Clank for the PlayStation 5.
Ratchet and Clank for the PlayStation 5. So, how is that?
It's amazing. I got the PlayStation 5, I got the 4K HDR, whatever, 60 FPS, whatever, refresh rate, whatever. And have it hooked up to that TV, so I jacked up everything. They were like, you might lose some fidelity, but you'll have ray tracing and 60 FPS. I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, sign me up for that. It's so amazing. I just love technology so much. Because the game looks beautiful, and it's got the PlayStation 5 controller, so it has the haptic feedback that somehow actually feels like sand is like jostling around in there. I don't know how they do it. And also it has the guns where if you push the right trigger down all the way, it'll unload both barrels, and you can push it halfway because there's a difference in the PlayStation 5 controller. You can shoot only one.
Yeah.
It's just a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece and a marvel.
I heard a lot of people were complaining about some of the Call of Duty games because the trigger weight was semi-accurate, so they were getting exhaustion on their finger hitting the trigger button.
I just love seeing how artists and stuff are using it. They're like, oh, this is the technology we have. How can we incorporate this into our game and make it feel like a real character itself?
It is interesting.
I love it.
Yeah, it's fun seeing what they're doing with that. And I noticed that they announced the pre-orders for the VR for the PlayStation 5 coming out soon. So it'll be interesting to see how they incorporate haptic feedback with virtual reality.
Oh, yeah.
Our game inflicts real injuries on the player.
Man, you're not far off. Lucky, God damn it. The guy who makes the VR headset.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, he was making a game for the VR headset, and he was like, I made one that actually kills people if you die in the game.
Yeah.
And he swears up and down he has a working prototype.
But he's having a hard time finding people to test it.
Now, Candice, you just spoiled what I got you for Christmas.
Do I want that or do I want the clap again?
So what about you, Faustus? What have you been consuming since last we spoke?
Well, I've got something here which runs a little bit like a risk of plugging somebody else's podcast, not mine.
That's fine.
But I have been listening to it, and I think it is appropriate for the Bloody Bits because it is a horror-adjacent podcast. This is done by someone named Lucas Kwong, who's a professor of literature in the CUNY system in New York. And he's doing a podcast called Monster in the Mirror. Okay. This is sort of a bit of a spin-off from the well-known Straight White American Jesus podcast, which is about Christian nationalism. And Kwong is essentially, because he's taking his academic specialty, which is in late Victorian literature, and he's looking back at the great monsters of that era, the most famous of whom is probably Bram Stoker's Dracula, but at others who are, I think, not so well known, in fact, probably known only to specialists at this point in history. For example, Dr. Yun Hao. Haven't anyone heard of him? He was created by M.P. Shiel in a novel called The Yellow Danger in 1898. First, one of the great Yellow Peril figures, the spiritual ancestor of Fu Manchu and possibly Dr. No. And there's an even more spectacular and forgotten monster from that era called the Beetle, who was a shape-shifting, gender-morphing Egyptian cult leader created by a writer who worked under the pen name of Richard Marsh in 1897. So it came out the same year as Dracula, and I believe in its first year actually outsold Dracula. It was more popular and more well-known, but has since fallen, I guess, into the depths of obscurity, except for these literature scholars. But Kwong has been running an argument that says these monsters answer both to the cultural anxieties of late Victorian Britain, anxieties about imperial decline, secularization, rapidly changing gender roles, foreign invasion of ideas and culture. So Dracula represents this foreign invasion. Yen Hao is the Yellow Peril with a giant army that's going to destroy Europe. The Beetle really upsets people by the way it undermines gender roles in Victorian Britain. And he says these are basically the same cultural anxieties that affect the sort of people called Christian nationalists, about national decline and invading quote-unquote foreigners, especially a xenophobic sensibility that China is going to destroy us. And, of course, there's lots of outrage about the public existence of LGBT people, undermining gender roles and so forth. So that these monsters resonate today, even if their names are somehow forgotten. Yeah. And they've set cultural templates that these Christian nationalists are reacting against. So, QAnon crazies really are thinking about something like Dracula. And they have this call to crusade that resembles and uses the same rhetoric as Van Helsing does and his anti-Dracula crew. The violence that people might fantasize against trans people are very much like the characters in The Beetle. And it's a remarkable program. It's a little bit less like a podcast than a fully produced radio show. I mean, it makes abundant use of dramatizations, reading, music integrated together to make shows that discuss particular issues. Very worth the time, I think, of listeners of this podcast with particular literary, historical, and political interests. So if you just go to your podcatcher or whatever it is and you put in, Monster in the Mirror, you'll probably find it. Or you can look for Lucas Kwong, Kwong. That's what I've been consuming this last week.
That sounds interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to check that out. I'm going to have a little bit of a dead period at work, so I might be able to listen to a podcast, and that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, I just got a book on Friday that's about the history of modern surgery. And this Scottish doctor in particular who knew Burke and Hare and worked with them. And
is this the Knife Man?
Yes. That book.
Yes. I've seen it. I haven't read it yet, but I was wondering if someone had.
Yep, well, I got it. I just haven't had time to read it yet because I'm supposed to be reviewing this giant anthology celebrating the 125th anniversary of Dracula. So I'm like, right when I get my new book.
Was that...
so I'll get to it eventually.
Was that Robert Liston, the knife The knife book?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I knew if you said the name, I'd remember.
Thought that sounded familiar. Okay, yeah. I watched a mini documentary on his life, and sounded like quite the interesting character, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's why I'm looking forward to getting a real in-depth view.
Yeah. A rock star surgeon before there were rock stars or surgeons. So I'm not consuming anything yet, but I will be consuming Takashi Miike's First Love that my wife got me as one of my birthday presents. Looks fantastic, looks ludicrous. Go check out a trailer for it. I don't even know how to describe it. It's one of those up there with his IP Man, Ichi the Killer, just crazy, over the top, insane, over the top Japanese exploitation cinema. So perfect stuff. And I'm going to probably watch that and then go play some more either Yakuza Like a Dragon or Yakuza 0. So
get in the Japanese mood.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get out of the Japanese mood, though. Let's get into the Canadian mood. And let's go back.
Okay. Free healthcare. Woo!
But you've got to wait. It's okay. You get it for free, but you do have to wait. All things to those who wait, I suppose. We are going to start talking here about Crimes of the Future. That came out this year, of course, and I selected it. When I thought of my favorite films of this year, first was Barbarian that came to mind, but we've already covered that. And then was Crimes of the Future. So saw this one in the theater. I was literally the only person in the theater watching it. That felt surreal in its own bizarre way. Loved it, and then immediately made my wife watch it as soon as I could find a digital copy of it for sale. So I suppose I'll turn it over to you guys. Candice, what is your history with Crimes of the Future?
I watched it when it was available for viewing. Not, like, at home. Not in theaters, obviously, because I live in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
I don't even know where I would have found it.
Yeah, very.
So I watched it as soon as I could, and I loved it. Love this movie.
Excellent. Very limited release in theaters, for sure. What about you, Faustus? What's your history with this one?
I've watched it a couple times on streaming. I also had a very positive reaction to it. It's weird. It does not appear to be out in physical media in the United States. I guess I could have ordered it from Australia if I really had wanted to. But I'm going to hope that someday it just gets a U.S. Blu-ray release. In the meantime, I've been watching it over and over on Amazon.
So that's interesting. There is a physical release of it locally within about 30 miles of here. I can go pick it up at a Best Buy. So I don't know if they're just importing it there or something. But I did notice they were talking about
pirating it.
I did notice there was a January release date for the 4K UHD listed on Amazon. So we'll see. Hopefully a physical copy will come soon.
Yes. Shout out for physical media. I really like them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They can't censor it ex post if you have it on physical media. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just the government not wanting us to watch this movie.
It's so interesting because he wrote this movie back in '98, right? And shelved it because it somehow didn't feel current. It didn't feel prescient. The things that are being discussed in it, and until recently, when one of his partners came to him and said, "Hey, there's been a lot of stuff in the news." With a very similar theme to what you discuss in this movie, you might want to bring it out, but we can get to that here in just a moment.
Sure.
So,
Did you know that there's a lot of detractors for this movie?
Yeah.
When this came out, critics did not like it.
Yeah, sadly it didn't do well. It had an estimated budget of $35 million, which I can't. Watching the movie, it's beautiful, but I don't know how accurate that is.
Don't see it.
But it made maybe $4 million in the theaters. So and even currently, if you go and you look at the reviews for it, it's fairly middling. Usually somewhere around a 5.2. Maybe a little bit too Cronenberg for people. I could say
I know some film podcasts I listened to, and they were talking about it. They said that they felt it was heavy-handed, too heavy-handed, and they said that there weren't enough people in the scenes to fill the scenes. It was like mostly they said it was because they thought it was too heavy-handed.
Interesting. Okay.
I was like, if you want to see a movie that's heavy-handed, watch Lady Vengeance. Literally the words "mother" written up in the sky in the clouds.
Yeah, that's a little overt for sure. So yeah, I guess we can get to it then. Written and directed, of course, by David Cronenberg, a longtime Bloody Buddy. Of course, we covered The Fly, Videodrome, and Rabid. And this one, I think, feels maybe the most autobiographical of all of his work.
I mean,
don't forget that his son, Brandon Cronenberg, is also a Bloody Buddy.
Yep. And he's still active and probably has a long career in front of him. I mean, to me, this movie felt a little bit like a capstone because it's basically working with themes that go back to very early Cronenberg. In some ways, a very literal way, because the very first feature or short feature he made, essentially as a student, was also called Crimes of the Future. That was in 1970. So he's actually recapitulating the title as well as themes throughout his career. The idea of bodily change is central to not everything Cronenberg has done. But I mean, you go back to Rabid, which is to cite one of the movies that is put here as Bloody Bits Cronenberg treatment. We've got a horror treatment of a woman whose body is changing to give herself a kind of weird vaginal thing under her arm that infects people. Videodrome is about people who are undergoing radical psychological but also physiological change in some cases. Whether they are hallucinations or not is unclear, but remember the movie ominously ends with the words, "Welcome to the new flesh." And in another Bloody Bits movie, you have The Fly, which is huge bodily change, gross bodily change. And, these are all about, changes in bodies. They all happen in interactions with technology. Like they're not just diseases or, gypsy curses or whatever. They're machines that people build and processes that they go through that involve science, and they create these somatic changes. Sometimes it's treated with horror. Sometimes it seems like as Cronenberg gets later in his career, it almost feels like we might want to embrace it. A movie that has not yet been discussed, may never be discussed, I'm not sure, on Bloody Bits is Crash, but which I'm sure you've both seen.
Yeah.
Where we have people both having, there's technophilia in an extremely literal sense. I mean, people are aroused by pieces of technology crashing into each other. In the form of automobiles, and they restage automobile accidents as a form of entertainment. But they also have this erotic relationship with the injuries that the crashes inflict on human bodies. And they don't seem like, at least to me, like particularly sad characters. They seem like they're treating their experiences as a kind of self-discovery or fulfillment. At least that's how I read Crash. And here in this movie, we've basically got that united now with a kind of rebels versus bad government narrative. I mean, the bad government is sort of in the background of Crash, but not as significant. But it's just an overall thematic comment. It appears that this is in a world that's decaying.
Yes.
The technology is largely coming apart. The world is falling apart. And the pieces of technology that actually seem to work well are kind of often hard to distinguish in a way between like machines and organisms. Yeah. They seem like hybrids of them both. And at the same time, the people's bodies are changing, as we'll see, to deal with the detritus of civilization. So maybe it's disturbing, or maybe it is something to be embraced, and we can discuss that.
Yeah.
I have a few cast notes if people want them.
Absolutely.
They're not too extensive because a lot of these people were, sort of solid, either Greek or Canadian character actors. I think this was mostly shot in Greece. Our main protagonist is named Saul Tenser, played by Viggo Mortensen, so he's the big star here.
Yeah.
It's amazing how the Cronenberg never seems to intimidated to be played hand over leads to these rather powerful male actors. He has James Woods in Videodrome and Jeremy Irons in both of the lead characters in Dead Ringers. And even in this exalted set, Mortensen might take the lead as, kind of the most amazing of them. I mean, he has a huge range. He's like big Mr. Hero guy in Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
And then he plays like amazing kind of tough guys in History of Violence in 2005 when working with Cronenberg. That
or
performance,
Eastern Promises.
Yes. Or Eastern Promises. History of Violence, frankly, scared me. He's a terrifying character there.
Yeah.
And Eastern Promises, again, holy shit, that naked fight scene in the sea room.
Fantastic.
You got to have a lot of self-confidence as an actor to go into that one, I think.
Yeah.
But he has huge commitment. A movie that maybe isn't as often discussed, but which he also did with Cronenberg, A Most Dangerous Method, 2011. Who would have thought that this movie about this weird sort of eroto-intellectual triangle among Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and Sabine Spielrein would have turned out to be so fun to watch, but at least I found it really watchable and compelling. And the commitment the way of describing his commitment to the acting that he does here comes from a little fact that I picked up off the commentary track, which is that in order to prepare for the part of playing Sigmund Freud, Morton went so deep into character detail that he actually learned to convincingly imitate Freud's German handwriting. In part because there are letter writing scenes in the movie itself where we get to see Freud writing, but also because Mortensen thought this was a way of finding his way into the character that it was his job to bring back to life. So, wow. What an
interesting
actor.
approach,
And also, it's like, the range here, you see him, like in Lord of the Rings, he is big Mr. Hero guy, and in this movie, you're afraid he's always going to die by the next scene.
Yeah.
I mean... He plays a man who's sort of painfully sick in some way, and keeps going. I guess I also have a theory about why the character is named Saul, but it's maybe painfully obvious, and we'll have to wait for the end anyway, so that we don't spoil. His partner Caprice is played by Léo Hélène Seydoux-Fournier de Cloison, or Léo Seydoux, who first came to attention. She's born in 1985. She first came to attention when she ran something called the Trophée Chopin and received the first César Award nomination for her performance in a movie called La Belle Personne. And boy, is that movie aptly named, because she is stunningly beautiful. I mean, she has a kind of Ingrid Bergman-like sophistication, I think.
Yeah.
In the way she appears on screen with the camera.
Plus, she's not afraid to be in a video game.
No. Well,
she's in Death Stranding.
Yep.
Well, she was a Bond girl, right? Because she was Madeleine Swan in Spectre.
That's true.
And also in No Time to Die. So she will do what she will pick up a paycheck for things. But she first became prominent. She won a Palme d'Or at Cannes in 2013 for her role in a movie called La Vie d'Adèle, chapitre 1 et 2, or Blue is the Warmest Color. And in 2016, when she was only 31, she was admitted Chevalier d'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres by the French Minister of Culture. So she's a big deal as well. Kristen Stewart's a big deal to American audiences. So I won't tell her a lot. She plays the part here of Timlin, the world's horniest bureaucrat.
Oh, God.
Aren't they all? Deep down inside.
And also a bloody buddy for those atrocious Twilight movies. Anyhow.
Coming soon.
One more shout out I'll give to an actor named Welket Bungwe. He's the guy who plays Detective Cope. Yes. This guy's 34 years old. He's probably accomplished more in his life than I ever will, and I'm 20 years older than he. He's originally from Guinea-Bissau, but he's listed as a Portuguese Ghanaian actor and film director. So he basically trained in Portugal. He now lives in Berlin, so he's become a permanent member of the Portuguese Academy of Cinema. He's also a member of the Deutsche Film Academy. And most of his actual credits appear to be in German language productions. For example, he played a principal part in a reimagined version of Berlin Alexanderplatz. So we have a distant connection here to another Bloody Bits movie, M, where that plays at home and appears. And I am just stunned. It's like this guy must act in at least 4 languages, maybe 5, and he's pretty cool. And even with this rather small part here in Crimes of the Future. So there are a number of other actors I know. I didn't get a lot of fun trivia off of them, although Nadia Litz, who plays the role of Router, one of the 2 technicians, quote unquote, who show up from time to time, has a movie called People Garden, which I'm going to dig into because it looks like it has Bloody Bits potential. Oh. She's a filmmaker as well as an actress.
Interesting. Interesting.
So. So there we are. That's what we have. Tanya Beatty, who plays Burst, who's her partner technician, apparently appears in Yellowstone, which all the TV people are watching these days. But which I haven't seen.
I saw that in the credits. I also caught Scott Speedman, who plays Lang Dotrice.
He's also Michael from Underworld.
I knew you were going to call that out, Candice. That's why I mentioned it. And Don McKellar, who was Whippet, worked with David before in Existenz. So stay tuned for that one.
Yes. That's another body transformation.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And just one last thing I have to mention is the soundtrack by Howard Shore once again. Fantastic soundtrack. So organic to the movie itself. So much of it you could confuse for being the machinery or just the ambience of the city surrounding them. It could be confused in with the soundtrack. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Shore is great, and composers really don't get enough recognition, I think, often when doing these movies. So
yeah. I mean, because he sets the atmosphere in it 100%.
It wouldn't be the same, without a brilliant composer behind it. So
absolutely, during the performance art scenes in this, you would take it a completely different way without that soundtrack. It would not feel the same at all. So I guess, with that kind of background behind us, we can go ahead and get to it. We open, and we establish that it looks, as you had kind of mentioned, Faustus, we're at a post-fall of society civilization. There are no cell phones. There's no cars. All we really see is a young boy digging in the water near a capsized, rusted-out ship. And his mother from the background warns him, don't eat anything that you find. I don't care what it is. A bit foreboding.
Yep.
And then we learn in the next scene why she warns him not to do this, because he's in the restroom of their home, which it's so funny because the first time I watched this, I was like, why does everything look dingy and dark and gross and like a Nine Inch Nails video? Why aren't people cleaning anything in here? But we'll get to that. There's a good reason, actually. So
you should enjoy that first scene, by the way, because it's one of the very few times we will actually see any sunlight in this movie.
Yeah, that's true. It's one of the few outdoor scenes where there is any sunlight, for sure. And then he goes and brushes his teeth, and as he bends down, it looks like he's going to spit the toothpaste into a waste bin, but instead
and you're like, well, that's weird.
Still bizarre, yeah. Instead, he picks up the trash bin and starts eating it, taking bites out of the side plastic of it. And as he does
with
so,
this weird, thick, white drool, just coating it.
Yeah, and the camera kind of pans up from that to see his mother watching him do this. Then later that night, and from what I understand, at Cannes, there were a few people walking out of the film at this scene. We see his mother waiting for him to go to sleep. Then she approaches the bed, gets a pillow, and in frame, kills a child for the movie. Yep. So already it gets at least 1 star from Bloody Bits. You kill the
This is how you show your bona fides. You kill the kid at the very beginning of the first act.
Yeah, in frame, not off camera.
And the way she does it too is she crouches over him on the bed, puts the pillow on him, and then pins his arms and legs down so he can't struggle. It is dark.
Intensely dark. So then she picks up it's like a walkie-talkie that they're using because she gets a little message signal from it and says on the other end is apparently his father. And she tells him, hey, come and get the corpse of that thing that you call your son. I'm leaving. So, I mean, that's a hell of a way to get a divorce.
Yep.
That's her divorce note.
And so then Lang shows up, the father, and he is completely distraught over his dead son. And that's the intro to the movie, folks. Pretty rough. We've
really sets a tone.
Yeah, we've set the stakes pretty high already. We've killed your own child. Not just killed a child, your own child. And although
and did not care, said it was a creature.
Yeah, dissociated from it because it is not to her human. So then we get introduced to Saul Tensor in Caprice. Caprice wakes Saul up, and he is in this very interesting, and as you kind of mentioned before, Faust, is the technology that does exist and is functional, however functional that is, in this world is very interestingly organic. Yeah, and insect-like. Very, or crustacean-like. Because it's this bizarre hanging shell of a bed, which we learn that this is a future technology that is meant to reposition Saul as he sleeps, because he experiences pain while he is sleeping, and this device is meant to anticipate his pains and shift him away from those pains. So he's suffering, and as he wakes up, he mentions this to Caprice, and Caprice says, well, that's the bad news. The good news, we ran your blood work while you were asleep, and it turns out you have a new hormone. So that's good.
Yay! Like the ones we have already aren't enough.
Well, apparently they're not in this world, Candice. So they take him in, or she takes him in to do a little bit of inspecting of his body. And here we see that he's got these kind of port wounds in his stomach, where a scope is run through and then held up to the eye of the observer to go through and take a look at what's going on the inside. And Caprice says, hey, that this makes sense. There's a small adrenal gland. You've developed a new organ. So that must be throwing the machine software off. And Caprice mentions, well, now that you've got a new organ, we have another performance to prepare for, so I'm going to need to tattoo this new organ, and I'm going to need to tattoo it because of the new organ register. They require something uniquely self-referential.
Weird phrasing for a bureaucrat.
Yeah. It reminds me of social media nowadays. Like, everybody's got to kind of have their own brand. But also then, as you said, a bureaucracy surrounding censoring in a very almost literal way your art, which is you. We will cover that a little bit more once we get to the group. So next we watch them both eating their breakfast, and Caprice has no trouble. She's having bacon and eggs, nice little
Except
bowl.
for the fact that she's using a wooden spoon to eat.
Yeah, well, okay.
It's a weird choice.
Yeah, I suppose that maybe they've recycled all the metal for more important endeavors, so they're just using wood. So
yeah, but it's not like a regular size spoon that's wooden. She's using like the wooden cooking spoon, the big one.
Yeah, like the one you get beat with.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like the one some poor kid at the store sees and has PTSD for just one moment. So she's eating her bacon and eggs, and we cut back to Saul. And we're watching him attempt to eat in the groping chair. The breakfaster.
The breakfaster, I guess is what they call him. I mean, this is a weird device. It looks like it was designed by H.R. Geiger.
Yeah.
And he's attempting to eat. The chair supposedly moves him around as he's attempting to eat, and helps him to swallow and digest, which apparently is something he has a great deal of trouble doing. And what it really looks like is he doesn't get to eat anything because he's always being lurched around back and forth, trying to hold his spoon and eat his paste, which he doesn't get a chance to do much of. So it's really tough being Saul. Can't sleep right, can't eat right. He and Caprice then, I guess, leave breakfast and it's already dark.
Yeah. Well, anytime's a good time for breakfast.
The streets. Yeah. Finding their way, they were watched by various dark and sinister figures as they do. But they find their way to something called the National Organ Registry, which is housed in a ratty-looking office that looks like it was put up in about 1950 and not renovated and seldom cleaned since then. I mean, it really does. It's like one of those old frosted glass door panels with like the name of the office painted on it.
Yeah. It looks like it was originally intended to film a noir, and it's just never been cleaned since then.
I mean, you expect to see the door down the hall has like Spade and Archer or something.
Yeah,
painted on it. But anyway, this is their office. They go in, they meet Whippet and Timlin, who are the registrars. They say they're part of something called the NVU, or New Vice Unit, which I guess is some kind of strange secret police organization. And Caprice explains that she's Saul's performance partner. She used to be a trauma surgeon, but that something clicked in her when Saul was brought in as a patient, and they've been working together ever since.
You skipped over the New Vice Unit's phrase, their motto. That's very clever, and I love it.
What's that?
No crime like the present.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is when they also describe that their main concern, their primary concern, is that evolution is going wrong. And because in the world that we exist in, all pain is pretty much gone. People do not feel pain, as well as infections. And so it's like, all right, now things are starting to click, why everything is so dirty and kind of disgusting looking. And outside, there were people just cutting each other while they were making out in the streets. So they have to feel something.
This is like the future equivalent of finger blasting in the street.
Yeah.
When you cut someone.
Yeah, except, you're cutting into somebody. Because, hey, they can't feel pain. They're not going to get an infection. It's fine, right?
It's one of the themes of the movie that it's society versus nature, trying to overcome your baser urges and add refinement that is uniquely human. So it's not they're not trying to stop the evolution of the human body, they're trying to control the evolution of the human body. Is the point of the New Vice Unit. And so it's just one of the themes of the movie is, yes, this is your body and you're doing these things, but should you be trying to control it or should you just be going along with it?
Yeah. So they describe that Saul has been growing these new novel organs for years, and he's been getting them removed. He and Caprice do this as performance art. So they Whippet and what's her name? Timlin, yeah. Whippet and
You don't
Timlin.
remember your dream girl's name?
I do enjoy her performance in this, I have to say. Whippet and Timlin, they take him back and scope him to get a look at that new organ. And man, Timlin is really rooting around in there and just getting an eyeful. Whippet describes the organ as, it's small. It seems to be a bit of a slick surface, and it's very, very sensual, this new organ.
Yeah. Is an organ that's sensual?
Yeah.
There was something else I wanted to bring up when you were talking about in this future, hardly anyone feels pain anymore and there's no infections.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say that it's one of the things that I love about speculative fiction, as opposed to like a straight up drama or literature.
Yeah.
Where you just take this idea, what if no one felt pain and there was no danger of infection? And then you just run it to every logical conclusion you can think of. Just this one concept. Like the fact that like people cutting each other in the streets is the thing to do.
Yeah, there's some excellent world building here by Cronenberg in this one, for sure.
That's why I like movies like this better than ones that are like, it's about the human condition. I'm like, I live that. I don't want to watch that.
I mean, all movies, all drama is about the human condition.
And it's boring. This is much more interesting.
This is very much about the human condition, Candice. It's just a metaphor.
Yeah, it's the human condition. Yeah. And that makes it better.
Okay. So yeah, they get a good look at his organ, and he invites them to their next show, which Caprice is not particularly thrilled about. She says they're creepy, and that Timlin especially is very creepy. And I'm like, yeah, she's creepy, all right, the right kind.
She's
of
all like, she's got the worst nervous tics. She's like if someone was anxious and awkward taken to the extreme.
Very. Very.
But also comes across as having just a molten volcano of sexual energy inside of her.
Yeah.
Too much coffee, girl. But I think that there's also one thing you might want to notice. As they were doing this sort of inspection, did you notice that there was a fly rather prominent in the background on the soundtrack?
Yes.
Yes. So that fly will be back a couple times. I don't know what it means other than possibly being its own sort of self-referential Cronenbergian touch, but maybe it means something.
I think it's a bit that, as well as it elicits the feeling of we're in a septic environment, right? Where normally a person
this
could
is
be
not
very ill.
this is not a sanitized surgery area at all.
But they don't care, of course, because there's no more infections. So why bother? So then Saul explains to Caprice, listen, I know they're creepy, but wouldn't it be better to have these people on our side, right? We scratch their back. We invite them to a couple of shows. Maybe they don't bother us if we want to have a couple of unregistered organs that we don't tell them about, etc. It's better to make friends with them.
Go ahead. I was going to say, this is where I wanted to bring up the point that when they're talking about the performing arts and being done, and they're like, everyone wants to be a performance artist nowadays. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, but not everybody is as good at it, which was a very polite way of saying most of them suck.
Yeah.
This is a point that I have brought up many times in Bloody Bits, is that you have to strike that perfect balance between being aesthetically pleasing and enough of a touch to get your point across, but not so heavy-handed that it feels like you're forcing the viewer and they're resenting it. And I think this is Cronenberg and Lynch, to me, are two of the examples that I put forth as having that perfect touch.
Yeah, well, Cronenberg on this one was talking about how when he wrote this in the late 90s, he was kind of inspired by people who were doing body modification as performance art. Their dedication to the craft that's literally, written on their flesh permanently. He says he never really had the bravery to go that far with his creations, but he kind of feels a kinship to them in how much you expose yourself as an artist with everything you put forth to the public. No matter how many times you've done it. Yeah. So, yeah, they... sorry, go ahead.
They go back home. Saul is back in his not well-functioning bed, and two technicians, quote-unquote, come by named Burst and Router. And they are stunned when they say, oh, well, we have to check up on your bed. That's our job. I guess they're from the company that made it. And while they're doing this, they are stunned to find out that Saul and Caprice own something called a SARC unit, which is a biomechanical system for performing autopsies. They're just overwhelmed. That's one of the best units that we ever made. It was just gorgeous. I guess they have an unusual conception of gorgeous.
Well, they reminded me of my cellular biology professor. She would talk about aerobic and anaerobic metabolism, and you could see like the awe in her face when she was talking about it. She loved it so much. And when she like you know, when she would show the charts of metabolism, she would like always stare at them for like a minute in appreciation. And I loved it. It was the kind of enthusiasm that's infectious, and it's a reminder that every day is a miracle because every cell in your body is producing between 1 and 2 billion units of adenosine triphosphate every single minute. And there are 30 trails in the human body. So every 24 hours, your body produces 441 pounds of ATP. Now tell me that's not fascinating and miraculous.
Well, if it didn't work, you wouldn't be alive, that's for sure.
But no, the enthusiasm that they show where everybody else is like, I don't get it.
Oh, and they get even more enthusiastic in a little while, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
With that SARC unit.
Caprice's description of the SARC unit was, it is my paintbrush. And we get to see in the very next scene how it's her paintbrush.
Yeah, the performance is very interesting.
They've encased old Saul in a SARC unit, which in this case looks like it's some kind of giant casket composed of moving biomechanoid parts. H.R. Geiger is no longer alive, but I think that his influence here is very strong. Mm-hmm. Various people are standing around. They're fascinated by it. You have ancient monitors reading Body is Reality. Caprice, in an amazing low-cut dress, uses a control which is mounted on her chest to open Saul up. Like the unit has like these arms, right, with scalpels on the ends of them that reach in, and they cut Saul open. And we get occasional close-ups of Saul's face where he has this blissful or sometimes almost orgasmic expression on his face. Somewhere in the background, we have a minor character he seems like a minor character who's going to become more important and as time goes on. I think this is actually, we're looking here at not Dr. Nessatier, but the other member of his conspiracy, Longdatrice. He takes out a strange-looking candy bar. It's like a purple. Takes a big bite out of it and then leaves it on the bar.
And I had a note here real quick. How come there's always somebody eating during an autopsy?
Hey, they're keeping up. Yes. Didn't even put that together. Except this isn't an autopsy yet.
No, I know. This is art. I get it. And
damn it.
Just on your point, though, of the low-cut dress, Faustus, because every other scene with her in it, she's dressed so drably, right? And now when we're having this surgery, this grand performance, she's dressed quite provocatively.
Mm-hmm. Her hair's amazing in this, too.
Oh, yeah.
She has that perfect mussed-up look. Oh, love it.
Mm-hmm.
So, we get Saul's organ out. We see, the first thing we see is a close-up of it in a jar full of preservative. And now it's the after party with guests drinking what looks like absinthe to me.
Yeah.
It might be ouzo or something similar that looshes up when you put water in it. Whippet and Timlin come over to look at the organ. And then Timlin starts an uncomfortable conversation with Saul.
I love this.
Who is resting on his couch wearing this black monastic robe.
Yeah. I love that she slams her drink before she goes over to have the conversation with him. She's like, all right, gotta work up some courage.
No, don't do this.
Just a
He's
second.
like, don't do this. This is a bad idea.
Such a great character, though. And I love she goes right up to him and just immediately, the first question, can I ask you something intimate?
Eddie's like, oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, hold on a second here. Let me get comfortable. And this, Faustus is where she asks the question that the movie is asking. That surgery is sex, isn't it? Surgery is the new sex. And Saul responds.
Which.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, which goes along with the guy, eating while he's watching it happen. So if he's essentially watching people have sex and he's eating, that goes along with Fresh. About the urge to eat and the urge to have sex intertwined.
There you go. You called it back. Saul he points out, does there need to be a new sex? And Timlin very succinctly says, yeah, it's time. It's time for a new sex.
Yeah, we need to try something new. It's getting old.
Yeah. She says, because when I watched Caprice cut into you, I wanted to be in the Sark unit, and I wanted you to be cutting into me. And this is when
penetration happening.
Yeah, I mean, very literally. So this is
as deep as you can get. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, and it's funny. One of the notes that during this scene that Cronenberg had for Vigo, Vigo asked, "How much pleasure should I be displaying, or acting out here?" And Cronenberg said, "There's no limit." So he said, "Good," and went for it. So this is when we cut back to Lang at the bar. He's having a bar at the bar, and the two representatives, the two technicians from Lifeform Wear, by the way, great name for the company. They're talking about how their Saul to them is their most challenging client because he's an artist, and art requires pain, which only some people have pain nowadays, and only in their sleep. So for them,
maybe that's how not everybody's a good artist then. Maybe that's why.
Yeah. I mean, when we get to the other performance that they see later,
it's bad.
People have notes about it for sure.
It's real on the nose or on the ear. I have that highlighted.
That's your Tim Yobo red ink joke, isn't it? There had to be one. There had to be one. So while this conversation takes place, somebody sneaks Lang's bar that he left on the table, sneaks off with it, takes a bite out of it, does not agree with him. Let me just say. Because he immediately starts regurgitating and spewing up this bluish liquid and collapses. And I like the two technicians don't even react. It's like,
they're not fazed.
That's not what we're here for.
No. So we go back to the organ registry, and we see that Detective Cope is there asking Timlin and Whippet about Saul. So they're like trying to explain it, and they're back and forth with each other. They're like whispering and giggling, and they got like snide laughter. Like he totally doesn't get it.
Well,
yeah, because now they've been charmed by the artist.
Mm-hmm. And then they don't notice that the clock on the wall in their office is stopped. Did you see that?
I didn't know. Huh.
It stopped the whole scene, which I think is deliberate. I haven't been able... It stopped at about 10:42, and I haven't been able to figure out if there's any significance to that, although I think there must be. So if you, audience, happen to know what the significance of 10:42 a.m. or p.m. happens to be in the context of this movie, please write in. Mm-hmm. Let me know.
We'll send you a Bloody Bits beer cozy if you have the correct answer. So they're sharing their enlightenment about his art and saying, what he does is art with his body. And the detective shows a lump on his side. He says, "Here, I got a lump on my side. Does it make me an artist?" And Timlin points,
and that's when they're like looking at each other and snickering.
Yeah, Timlin points out, no, he takes his body's rebellion and then he shapes that. He takes control of it. They tattoo it and they make performance art out of that body rebellion. So we go back to their home where Caprice is telling Saul that the bed has been telling her that he's working on something new. But why so soon? He goes, I guess I'm feeling creative. So I've got something cooking up in me. And then this is when we cut to Clinic's performance, which Candice, as you mentioned, it's a man with his
real on the ear,
very on the ear performance. It's not easy on the eyes, but that's all right because they've sewn his shut and his mouth, and he's got about 60 ears just stuck to his body,
all over his body. He's just wearing like little shorts.
Yeah. And they were Cronenberg, as a promotion for the movie, gave out one of those prosthetic ears.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. I was like, man, I would have loved to have one of those. But anyhow.
He's a real Van Gogh, that Cronenberg, huh? Van Godenberg.
This guy should have Van went. because he does a interpretive dance while the crowd kind of watches half-heartedly. They're more interested in cutting themselves and drinking and, you know, having their own fun.
Having their own public sex.
Yeah, the new sex. So Saul is watching on, though, again in his monastic black robe and mask. And this is when we meet Adrienne, who is a biology consultant for the performer. She says, you know, not really feeling it. By the way, you know those ears don't even work? Faker. So she tells Saul, you should go meet this guy, though. Dr. Nessatir, was it? He specializes... Nessatir, yeah. He specializes in inner beauty, though you might need to go see him about politics. So Lang, we cut to him. He walks up to Saul along Saul's way to go meet with the doctor, and he says, hey, big fan of your work. I've got a great bit for you. What about an autopsy using the Sark unit on my dead son? What do you think? And Saul's like, what? Yeah, no, it's cool. His mother murdered him. And you want to make a radical expression with your art, right? Well, how radical are you? Are you afraid of a little emotion? And Saul says, I'm afraid of everything, and walks away. So then Saul relays the show idea to Caprice back at the house, though. And we see that she is laying in the Sark unit while Saul is, I guess, doing a little
buck-ass naked
practice.
Must be added.
Yes, she's quite naked. Naked as the day she was born. And Saul's doing a little performance art on her, I guess. Maybe calibrating the Sark unit.
He accidentally cuts her. And he's like, I'm sorry. He's like, that was the machine. That wasn't me. And she's like, sure, buddy.
Yeah. No, that was you.
But she's like, she's like, just keep doing it. And he looks so surprised that I'm like, I guess they've never done this before then. Like, you kind of assume that they've, had sex. But this kind of seems like a first-timer for him with her.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's implicit in the movie, they don't necessarily say it directly, is that the inability to feel pain has also diminished the ability to feel anything. Right? Any sort
that'd be
of
boring.
Regular ass having sex pleasure seems to, that seems to have gone away if we want to cut each other now, right?
So to move on, then you see both of them in the Sark together, and the machine is just slicing them up, just cutting them here and there.
Well, she says an interesting thing because she's feeling it, and Saul says, you could be on the inside for our next show, and then she says, no, maybe this is just for us.
Very intimate.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more intimate you can get.
Yeah, so they're snuggled up in the Sark unit getting chopped to bits by scalpels.
And this is a part where I wanted to point out, it's another example of cognitive dissonance in the movie. Because if you were just listening to this, you'd hear the moaning, the whimpering, like a sex sound.
Mm-hmm.
But when you open your eyes and see what it is, they're getting cut. And so you have this, this is not what I was expecting to see when I opened my eyes. It's a little horrifying.
Yeah.
We also get a close-up of the little remote that presumably operates the Sark. And it's just a wonderful machine. It sits there and it buzzes and it chirps and it appears to breathe and it glows in places. It's like a little half-living, half-machine trilobite. It's splendid. In terms of the unity of machine and organism. So
yeah, and that's the thing that she had attached to her midsection,
her dress,
her dress. Yeah. It It really, yeah, it almost feels alive, the little thing and I mean, they must have set it on some sort of a program to run while they're laying in the machine together. Again, and this is that whole what has happened with technology, right? We've got some technology that's all very organic and very never explained really how it operates, but it's there. But yeah, no cars, no traditional technology that we would be used to. Yeah. So now Saul goes and meets with our detective friend. It turns out
Cope.
Saul, and Saul is working with Detective Cope. He's a little bit of a undercover agent. The detective asks him about his new organ and why he wants to go undercover with this. Says, you're deep in this body art stuff. I don't understand it. I don't get why you'd work with us. And Saul says, well, I don't like what's happening with my body, you see, and I want to fix this. I want to get rid of this. I want to control it. Then he tells the detective about the meeting with Dr. Nasir, asks what he should do about it. And he says, okay, good, go follow up with it, meet with the doctor. And Saul asks, just one thing real quick while I got you. Why is this called the New Vice Unit? And he says, well, it's easy. It sounds sexier than body derangement. So it's easier to raise funds. Then Saul asks, oh, by the way, I heard something about a mother that killed her 8-year-old. Any chance I can talk to her real quick?
Juna Dotrice is the character.
Yeah. So Saul is clearly kind of in the middle. He's playing both sides here. So Saul goes to Doctor. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, does he go to? I think the next scene is Burst and Router, but maybe I'm missing it.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Well, we go to this decrepit auto body shop. Is a callback to Crash, perhaps, because you have a similar facility in that movie. You've got Burst and Router, and they're busy kind of reconditioning the Sark unit back so that it can do autopsies. And they're really impressed by this machine. This one was converted by someone with a delicate touch. It's in beautiful shape, as opposed to other Sarks, which apparently were badly hacked up. Caprice has been wandering around inspecting equipment, and while she's not watching, these two women, Burst and Router, strip and climb into the Sark. And they say, hey, Caprice, check us out. What do you think? Do we have a future in performance here? Which, of course, makes Caprice laugh.
Yeah, they're very professional.
Gratuitous, perhaps, but, hey, it's David Cronenberg. He can get away with asking for stuff like that.
Exactly. No, it's a fun scene that they threw in there.
Yep. So then we get back to Saul stalking around the landscape, eventually going up to a dark, dingy apartment to meet with Dr. Nassatir, who's very impressed by Saul. Saul, Tensor, and the inner beauties. And so Nassatir proposes to install a port into Saul that will allow maximum access to his organs. Saul is apparently a candidate to become a contender in something strange called an inner beauty pageant. This movie's more like Crash than I realized, because you have these enthusiasts for something very strange operating their little thing on the side of society.
Yeah, and with the inner beauty pageant, that's Dead Ringers, right?
That's also a callback to Dead Ringers, definitely.
Totally.
So
mutant women.
Yes, tools for operation on mutated women.
Yeah, so they're going to install a rip lock on him, is what they call it. Hey, why not? Why not be? He could be a pageant guy. I get it. He's got some beautiful organs to display. Apparently, Whippet told him it was sensual. So why not? Then Saul goes to see. What was the kid's name in this?
Well, first there's a scene where she meets Caprice, right? They're out in the street. They meet each other in some dark archway.
Yeah.
And there's this another erotic scene where Saul shows Caprice the zippered sutures or whatever that he has across his abdomen that were installed by Nassatir. And of course, Caprice is immediately erotically fixated by these scars, which Saul describes as a raincoat for internal organ flashers.
Yeah, she, just another instance of, if you just listen to this scene, you'd hear, like mouth noises and some moaning, you'd be like, oh, this is pretty hot. And then you realize that she's tonguing a cavity inside of his body. She's tonguing an open wound.
Yeah, which he has to tell her to be careful or he'll spill.
Ugh. So gross.
I guess that's the Crimes of the Future equivalent of the courtesy tap, Candice. No, you're right. Then after this is when Saul goes to see the dead child's mother in the police holding area. Kind of looks like a cafeteria. Really.
Or a prison. It's a laundry, right?
Yeah, it's a the laundry room of the prison.
Like all these washing machines. June has some laundry that she's folding. It doesn't look, the exterior, which we get a single shot of, doesn't look a whole lot like a prison. But I guess nothing really looks like anything in this movie except kind of a decrepit building of one category or another.
Right. Yeah, true. And so he goes in and she explains that the reason that she killed her child is because to her, it wasn't human. It ate synthetic things, and she felt as though Lang had made him, or whatever it is. And even the thought of having that worm growing inside her made her ill. So she killed the boy and then confessed. But it was the perfect crime because there was no body.
Yeah.
So Saul then, curious, he asks, so if the police took it and autopsied the boy, what do you think they'd find inside of him? And she says, outer space. Something new, something alien, who knows? Then we get a brief scene with Lang, and we kind of see the operations of his group, where they're making these bars that they've been eating. And he's telling his second in command, look, when what happens here with this autopsy, we're going to be drawing a lot of attention from the government onto our operations. So we need to move everything that we're doing someplace else, someplace secure, someplace safe.
It reminded me of the underground group from They Live. Only instead of distributing sunglasses, they're distributing their candy bars.
Yeah, I could see that. Totally. So then we cut to Caprice, who's watching one of their artist friends getting a face modification, this is more of like your fancy wine and cheese party, less of your rave in the Matrix movie, guy with the ears dancing around and people cutting each other. Although there is audience participation with the cutting, for sure. And for whatever reason, this performance, man, it flips Caprice's cookie for her. Because she goes up and she talks to the artist after the event and expresses her desire to be modified and to be opened metaphorically.
Yeah, the phrase that she says is that when her friend was getting her face cut open, she said that she looked almost beatific. Like a saint that's experiencing spiritual ecstasy. And what that did was it brought to my mind the movie Martyrs, which they experience the beatificness from extreme physical pain, and this is like the exact opposite of it. But it's still kind of like a destruction of conventional beauty.
You know what's funny, Candice? When I was flirting with the idea of not limiting this to 2022, Martyrs was one of the movies I was thinking about covering this month.
I'm noticing a theme here, Eddie. I'm noticing a theme in movies that you like.
What's that, Candice?
I think that you like movies that are cerebral.
Okay.
And I think that you like movies that are about your emotional state or your mentality, your consciousness, and what it plays in with your body. I think you like the juxtaposition of trying to transcend your body's urges while at the same time trying to have separateness from it and finding a higher state. Would you say that's on the money? On the Eddie money?
I think that's Eddie money. No, I think similar to Cronenberg, I find the body, the study of the body, that's all you are, right? Body is reality. That, as the monitor said. Like he was talking about,
but when they have characters that say stuff like "you look beatific," it just makes me think of the mind and how it can be separate but also influenced by the body.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I don't know how Fresh falls into that, but I think it's
that's just more because it has like a message and layers.
I thought that was interesting for like objectification taken to a very literal level and very grotesque. So that might be why Fresh was my pick. But yeah, okay, fair point. So Caprice gets some implants in her forehead and goes and shows them off to Saul.
He's not impressed.
No. It's like,
he's. I guess he asked, "Why did you do it?" And she said, "To be more open." Yeah. So I guess like disfiguring your face would make you more vulnerable, and so you'd be more open. Because she said she wants to be open artistically, spiritually, emotionally, and physically.
Yeah. Well,
she's also the only character in this movie who has real human emotions. Everybody else has a sort of detachment, or the only thing they feel is pleasure.
I would say,
and she seems to be the only one who is horrified by the fact that they're going to cut up a little boy who was murdered by his own mother. She's the only person who has a problem with that.
Yeah, so that's fair. She's the only one who protests that, for sure. But I would say by the end, Saul has human emotions. Maybe the only real display physically of human emotions by the end of it. So yeah, he kind of hand waves her forehead implants, and she says, "Saul, I want to perform this autopsy. She's had a change of heart." And Saul lets her know, "Well, look, I just got to tell you, I've got a few things that are growing in me, but I do not want to extract them." So she says, "Well, this could, be a problem for your health. So we probably need to do that." And he says, "No, well, if it's needed, then we can do it in private." So already he's rebelling against his prior arrangements and his prior messaging.
Stance was get it as out of me as soon as possible because I hate this and I reject it. Yeah. And now he seems to be getting along with it a little bit more.
Yeah, these are tumors to him. But now maybe they're not. Maybe they're something important. So Saul meets with Whippet back at the new organ registry, and Whippet lets him in on a little secret. Says, "Hey, let's go back here where we have our very special secret safe room with our more controversial things." So they walk back to another room that looks like the room they were in, and he says, "All right, I got to let you in on the deal. I'm actually the registrar for the internal beauty pageant. And Saul, buddy, you are a shoo-in for Best in Show."
In Best Original Organ, which I thought was nice.
Best Original Organ with no function.
Yeah. I like how so there has to be an organ with a function, right? One would assume that you'd have both.
Yeah, that's true. I guess you get runner-up in that one. So then he says, "Well, I'm sorry, I might have to fake it, though. I don't really have anything going on." And then Whippet gets a bit incensed, and he says, "Hey, but the issue here is that you, Saul, you're all about rejection and anger. You remove your organs. You don't respect that inner beauty." So Saul's like, "All right, well, I guess I'll get out of here then. See ya." And he's like, whoa, wait, no, hold on. We need you. You're a big celebrity. How about if we just give you best in show no matter what? No, Mr. Cronenberg, what if we give you the $15 million to make the movie you want to make and we won't have any notes? He has a great story about when he was going to make Scanners into a TV series back in the day with ABC, right? And a network executive came up to him and said, we want to work with you. You're a big name. You're one of the biggest names in genre film. We want to make your Scanner series, sir. However, we can have no head explosions. And Cronenberg said, well, that's kind of the thing. That's kind of the big scene, the point.
No, we learned in Scanner Cop they could do a lot more than just head explosions.
That's true. Oh, God, dear. And so Cronenberg said he played along with the executives for a little while, and eventually they stripped so much of what made Scanners out of Scanners that the executives came back to him and said, I don't know, this just feels boring. And they didn't want...
Oh, no shit.
Oh, you took everything out of the art, and then now it's not what you wanted anymore. Huh. I guess pulled the teeth out of it and it can't bite. So yeah, he tells him, Saul, we'll give you whatever you want. Just fine. Okay. He goes, great. Well, what if I win? And then the next day I go have a show where I rip the organ out. How about that? And they're like, that's fine. That's fine. So Saul leaves. And now Timlin intercepts him on the way out.
Oh, man. And does she ever? She's like a predator.
Yeah. Yeah, she...
Hard for us drab little bureaucratic insects that we are not to be drawn to you. We want to follow that light, fuse with that light. What a performance.
Fantastic. Yeah, where was this in Twilight, Candice?
And this is Bella Swan.
Yep.
She's a good actor. Whatever the director is in those damn Twilight movies has got to be ruining it. Because she is fantastic in this role. I mean, the way her awkwardness paired with being like a predator, and meanwhile she's in this scene warning him, "Oh, Whippet is the one who's getting starstruck by you," while she's advancing on him, cornering him. And Saul to try to like distract says, have you ever heard of any organs that could digest plastic by any chance? Or maybe like a system of organs? She goes, no, never heard of any systems of new organs. And then she just starts naming the different systems of the human body. And it's interesting because in a world where sex has changed fundamentally, it's almost very awkward acting like she doesn't even know what to do. So she goes up to him. She sticks
her fingers in his mouth.
Yeah, and then tastes her finger and then goes in to kiss him. And he kind of pushes.
But she asks to be part of the show. She said, "Do you ever let me be part of that show? I'd love to be in that Sark module with you at the controls." She's so into this.
Yep. Yeah. And so he pushes her away, though. He says, "Sorry, I'm not very good at the old sex," and leaves.
The old sex.
So then we have Saul and Caprice meeting with Lang one more time in a hotel room with a drop-in freezer.
They go to the Hotel Sparte, which is one way you know this was shot in Greece. And yes, they have the body of Brecken, as his name is, in a refrigerator unit in the, like one of those top lift refrigerator units, freezer units. Yeah. And Caprice looks at this. She turns away with an astonishing expression of grief and sadness, as she can't really believe that she's being part of this.
Yeah, it's horrifying. They're going to be cutting open this poor child in front of everyone for a political statement. And I feel like it's clear that the father doesn't give a fuck that he was a human being and a real child. He just wanted to make a political statement, and he was using this child to do that.
There is that. When he finds the kid dead, he is visibly distraught.
But is he visibly distraught because of the fact that this child is dead, or because his ultimate plan had failed?
What if they can't feel pain emotionally also?
Well, I mean, he seems distraught about the fact that his wife, cut off his chances of making a grand statement in front of the world.
Yeah, that's fair. But
he never mentions the fact that this is my child.
Yeah.
This is my little boy. He never says anything like that.
I mean, he's not as detached as the mother that killed him, but there is a detachment there for sure. And yeah, Caprice, she points out, she says, listen, in performance art, consent is kind of important. And I don't think that the child can consent here. So then Lang points out, he says, well, I'm I'm his father and I'm okay with it. The mother clearly is okay with it.
His mother doesn't care. Then he produces one of those weird purple candy bars and invites Saul to have a bite.
Yeah.
I think it will be a revelation.
It's an interesting...
Saul declines.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment because, this is when he points out, like, he says, have you seen one of these bars before? He says, no, I haven't. He goes, yeah, well, Saul mentions that he talked to the wife about the child's digestion, and that's when he produces the bar. That's right.
So she says, I have an eating problem, as do you. And the breakfaster chair isn't helping. You are a man who is fighting what he really is. You should let your body lead where it wants to go. This is a fantastic natural process that you should surrender to. Saul isn't going that direction at this moment. He goes instead back to a new talk with Cope and asks, should I do the Brecken show? That is to say, the autopsy. New Vice, represented by Cope, says that it wants Dotrice, but they want his whole group of freaks, that they call him. They are evolving away from the human path soul, says Cope. It can't be allowed to continue. Cut scene, and now we have Dr. Nassatir, who's getting his own visit from Router and Burst, coming from Lifeform because he has a breakfaster chair too. And then we cut to Router and Burst leaving his crumbling apartment, and then cut to Nassatir, dead in his chair.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
So maybe those Lifeform wear ladies aren't all they appear to be.
Yes.
Then we go to the show. And everyone is here for the show. The two technicians from Lifeformware, they're in the back, of course. Whippet is there, and Timlin is there, watching the preparation for the Brecken autopsy. Little uncomfortable having a nude child on my screen, but in the proper context, I'll accept it.
This is well done. This is an angelic little boy.
Yes.
In his appearance, and that I think is sort of artistically important, given what happens next.
Yeah, it's framed properly and it's in the proper context. So this is when we cut to Saul is in control of the Sark unit, and Caprice is narrating the event, explaining to the audience what this act, the first autopsy, is called and how it's going to go down. I don't have the exact quote in front of me. If you would, I don't know if you have that note handy, but effectively
her comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Her comment on once he's opened up. I have the quotation.
Yes,
where he sees this mess of organs that have already been tattooed.
Yeah,
the crudeness and ugliness and desperation have already seeped inside here. We are doing this as a map to guide us out of the heart of darkness. And she knows correctly that autopsy means seeing for oneself. And this is where they see for themselves what's happened. But it's nasty. And Dotrice at this point flees outside to the stairs of this rotting mansion where this autopsy performance has been set, and he's confronted there by Router and Burst, and they deny that the insides of Brecken were made that way by his mother. Then they pull out a power drill and they murder him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on the steps.
Why is he upset? He's upset because he thought that he was going to be making this, like if the child was alive, this grand exposition on this is our cause for our group, is the fact that we should be actively changing our bodies because our bodies are trying to tell us that it's time to change. And it got ruined by all the tattoos inside of it. And no one ever gets a good look to see that this is a working system that helps the boy eat plastic. That's his food source, his synthetic materials.
Right. He wanted to prove that the evolution that's taking place with others is the next step in evolution, should be accepted. There was a surgery that they had figured out to rearrange the organs so people could eat plastic and thrive. And the boy somehow had inherited this surgery.
Makes no sense, but okay, let's keep going on with it.
Effectively, the boy was the first one born to be able to digest the plastics and the synthetics and the industrial waste, much like the converted in the guy's group were able to do. And he wanted that. Because
they had the surgery done and he was the one that was born able to do it.
Yes.
So it was proving their point that humankind is changing and we need to embrace it. And if the boy was alive, he was going to do that, and he wanted to do it now that the boy was dead, and that got spoiled for him, and that's why he's crying, not because this is my boy.
But he wanted to prove that it was natural, right? The boy was born this way, so that was natural. But yeah, his organs were different. Somebody had sabotaged the autopsy. So yeah, they kill Lang. Drill to the head, he's dead. And then Saul, after the performance, meets up with his detective friend. And he is pissed. He points out, so I saw that hack job that was done to the boys' insides. The detective says, yeah, well, we got there first. We had a man on the inside. Well, not a man on the inside. We had Timlin on the inside. See, we cut the boy open. And we had a look at his insides, and they were weird, but they were all natural, like nothing we've ever seen. So we can't let that out. So Timlin, inspired by Caprice, did all the work, and Lang was murdered. And the detective's like, well, I don't know anything about that. Clearly, maybe his wife set it up. And Saul points out rather astutely, well, it doesn't matter now because his cause has a martyr. And maybe that's what they needed.
Sounds like you are becoming a believer, as Cope says. And Saul stalks off. Saul! It looks like something as odd is going to be happening. Because now Caprice confronts Saul trying to sleep, in pain, physical pain, and possibly emotional pain, too, right? This is where we see Saul coming, I guess this is Eddie's reference to his coming into contact with his own humanity. So, and he had this bizarre dream to Trees, Brecken, everyone all in the Sark, a family autopsy with the two, Saul and Caprice, at the controls. So he's suffering in an important way.
He describes it to Caprice. He says that he was in pain, and she asks what pain is like. And he says, well, you feel it when you dream, and it becomes a part of your dream. And then it becomes a part of your mental pain, and that confuses you. And she says, well, I almost thought that I was dreaming and that I was having that pain. Then he describes the dream.
I feel like that it kind of hinted towards like a psychic connection between them. Because it seemed like they had the same dream and were experiencing the same thing while they were dreaming.
Yeah, you've got the artist and the muse that are so linked inextricably in this. The part of their performances are very sexual in the when the surgery is taking place, and she's physically disconnected from him. She's remotely controlling the blades and everything. Yeah, you could say there has to be some sort of I don't know about psychic necessarily, but they've been conditioned together.
Yeah, I couldn't think of a better word. I don't think they were going for
Right.
something supernatural, but maybe that mental powers were also part of the evolution.
Yeah, could be. So they kiss and kind of embrace each other on the floor. Then we cut to the next day, and he's back up in his chair trying to eat again.
It's
Going
like
even worse than usual.
the high chair from hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way
In
that
so many ways, right?
yeah, it really does look like something from a Geiger-esque hellscape. So, and this time, I mean, you can hear him choking. He's moving his throat back and forth manually with his hand, trying to choke down any of the food. And Caprice, she's out. She can hear him suffering. She can hear this. She walks over and grabs. Earlier on, she put one of these on, but it's a ring that presumably records, like your cell phone camera would. And then she goes and finds a little box full of those bars. She pulls one out, walks over to him and says, well, what do you think? Should we try it? He kind of chokes out a yes. It's time to try it. So he takes the bar, unwraps it, takes a bite out of it, and as soon as he does, the machine that he's in powers off. And suddenly he's...
Not off
well,
entirely.
Yeah.
It stops moving.
Right.
But it still makes noise. Did you hear this on the soundtrack?
No, I did not.
At the very end, the breakfast chair is actually purring.
Huh.
Like a cat.
Interesting.
And meanwhile, Saul, after he swallows, there's this look of calm that comes over his face.
He gets a beatific look.
Yes. He gets his beatific look. And then the closing sound of the breakfast are purring, fade to black.
And a single tear.
Yep.
Yeah. So see Candice, he feels emotions. He cried.
Well, all they did was put, ammonia salts underneath his nose to make him cry like that.
Okay. They pulled out one of his nose hairs. So that's it.
I'm willing to believe. I believe that this actor can cry on camera when he wants to, if he wants to.
Oh, of course. Yeah. No, he's a fantastic actor. I'm sure he was. But so yeah, what do you think?
So now I can tell you why he's named Saul, right?
Yes.
You probably already figured it out.
Well, tell our audience.
As you all know from Acts chapter 9.
Oh yes,
Saul of Tarsus,
as we all know. Sorry.
Saul. Who is Saul of Tarsus? He's a persecutor of the new church, who on the road to Damascus has a conversion experience.
Oh well, the way that my preacher said it was that he fell off his ass and he was deaf, dumb, and blind.
Yeah, well, he was but that's mine is just a short version. He eventually becomes Paul, the author of the letters and all that. And so he, as you notice, this is what Saul does. He's originally a part of the secret police, right? He's originally part of the persecutors, but he changes. Just as Cope says, it sounds like you are becoming a believer once they have a martyr.
So instead of being Saul Tensor, he'll be Paul Relaxer.
Paul Tensor.
Relaxer. Candice. He had his Damascus road experience in a convenient candy bar. Yep. It's a little bit easier for him. Fantastic movie. God, I remember as soon as I got out from the theater watching it, I wanted to go just put my thoughts down on paper somewhere, because it's so interesting that what Cronenberg has done with it, and the thing that 20 years ago was relevant and then he felt it wasn't was of all things eating plastic, right? Now they've determined that they're microplastics in about 80% of the people on Earth, and It just seems like it's there. We don't know what
for some reason in LA it's centered on their chest area. Weird.
We don't know what the effects of that are going to be. And scientists have also talked about bacteria that can consume plastic. Little simple single-celled organisms that can break down plastic. So it's not impossible to imagine a future where that could evolve in some fashion. Humans eating their own waste. But it's fun because the way that he frames it, though, is it's not necessarily political. It's not just a big indictment on what we've done to our world. It's just kind of the window dressing of the movie. It's the background, right? It's what moves the characters. But
definitely largely, the main. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say largely it feels like, as we kind of discussed before, what it is to be an artist is a lot of what this film is about. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that one of the major themes of this movie, and I don't think there's one singular theme to it, I feel like it's whatever each one of us attaches onto, is the relationship of the consciousness with your physical body. Are they separate? Are they together? Does one control the other? Or do they symbiotic have a relationship together? I think that's my favorite theme of this movie.
Okay. So, Faustus, I guess we'll leave it on you to close out with your thoughts, and then we'll do our plugs at the end. How's that sound?
Well, I mean, to me, this just felt like a kind of Cronenberg capstone. And notice how many callbacks we had during this movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Cronenberg is very senior by now. And I mean, his career has gone on for more than half a century.
Yeah.
His very first movie is Crimes of the Future. This movie is Crimes of the Future. So I sort of felt that it felt like a kind of quiet valedictory to me, right? All these themes that we brought together about bodily change and the ability to accept it and the ability to live in a society where technology has taken over a lot of things get brought together. Maybe it ends in a kind of peaceful way, given the way the movie ends. And I don't know if Cronenberg himself thinks of this way, but it seemed like a kind of an interesting final statement. And, I kind of hope it isn't, but that's the way it felt coming out of it to me.
Yeah, one other thing I didn't mention earlier is usually in Cronenberg's his films, we follow doctors, we follow scientists. This is the first one where we're really following artists, right? So it's almost like a world where the roles are reversed a little bit from his typical films, where it is that the science has been accepted and integrated into art, right? Rather than the opposite, the science perverting or changing humanity, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. I totally get what you're saying with the capstone on it, though. I mean that the early 70s Crimes of the Future, of course, touches on the organ growth and to go back to the extra organ growth as kind of a central theme for this. Hopefully he keeps making more stuff. I mean, I'm sure he will. Last I heard, they are working on a Scanners TV series for one of the streaming services, and he's going to be directly involved in it, so that's good.
And carrying on the torch, Brandon Cronenberg, if you haven't seen Possessor, you really need to see Possessor.
I just saw the trailer for his new film that's coming out, too. The name escapes me right now, but it looks really interesting, where a guy commits a crime and they say, okay, well, you're sentenced to death for committing this crime, or we can make a duplicate of you and sentence that to death. I forget. Yeah. Infinity Pool. It's called Infinity Pool.
Love it.
All right. So I think that about does it for this episode of the show. Faustus, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry Tim couldn't be here to yell about pussy or whatever he was going to do. He was missed, but
Hey,
let
Tim
me
might
ask
have
you.
deep thoughts about the nature of art.
Of course, I'm sure he does. But it would have been about the bush in this and the 70s bush, the boobs in this, and whether they should have been 70s boobs or not. The hair, he definitely would have commented on the hair.
He doesn't like short hair. Would not like Leah Sadu.
Would not like Kristen Stewart either. So, all right, Faustus, is there anything you want people to pay attention to on the internet right now?
You mean like the dumpster fire that is Twitter or something like that? No, I mean, if you mean my stuff that I'm doing, I'm still at eroticmadscience.com. Mm-hmm. And if you come over to DeviantArt and look for Faustus EMS, I'm actually reposting a lot of material for review by the DeviantArt community. And I've got over 1,000 pieces up so far. More will be coming. And you can get to see what, a lot of people who are actual artists and whatever think of what's going on with that stuff. And it does come out in a nice format. So you might want to come over there and check that out.
Absolutely. Candice, what about you?
Well, keep your eyes sewn shut and all 60 ears open on your body, because coming up in January, I'm going to be on Everything I Learned from Movies, where we talk about Cyborg.
Oh, that's
the Albert
fantastic one.
Jean-Claude Van Damme joint.
Of course. Is this your first Van Damme that you're covering?
Yeah, it is, actually. They had no idea I love Jean-Claude Van Damme. No idea. This was news to them.
Make sure to have your towels handy, Candice.
I did. And also, they watched the original cut, and I watched the director's cut that's on the Blood Bank. So that was interesting in itself.
Interesting. So I'm going to be on the Mustachioed Podcastio. I don't know when, but we're going to be covering, I don't know if he has a thing with people saying it. We're going to be covering a Chuck Norris movie where he's trying to do comedy. So that's going to be great.
It's top dog.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, while you're over there, tell Daniel that he has to have me on and we have to do Colonel Blimp together.
Colonel Blimp. I will let him know that. And otherwise, go ahead and sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/bloodybits, where you can get access to the Blood Bank with over 3,200 weird, obscure, and crazy movies like this and many, many others. For Candice and Faustus, though, ladies and gentlemen, I think that this is how we end it.